like to welcome HOC staff and members of the public November 3rd, 2025 Administrative and Regulatory Committee meeting. My name is Linda Kroom, and I am the chair of the Administrative and Regulatory Committee. Joining me on this committee are Commissioner Paul Weech and Izola Shaw. Izola, are you there? Yeah, she's there. She's there. How you doing? The first item on today's agenda is the approval of minutes for September 3rd, 2025. Can I get a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Can I get a second? All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you. Those minutes have been approved. Thank you. We will now move to the next item on the agenda, and it's a discussion and an action item authorizing to implement voucher payment standard based on HUD's CY 2026 small area fair market rent. I would like to introduce President Andrews to provide an overview of this item.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, the public, and the HLC team. Commissioners, we are here today to present an item that comes before the commission on an annual basis. This is where our staff goes through a very detailed analytical process to determine a recommendation related to our payment standards. You'll hear the level of analysis that goes into this recommendation, ultimately a very important balancing act between increasing our payment standards so that we are able to afford more mobility and options to residents in the county, and also decrease rent burden to the extent we can, while maintaining the recommended amount of reserves in this program. Before I turn it over to Ms. Hayes for the presentation, I do want to just acknowledge that, of course, we are in a government shutdown phase, and I do want to just indicate that while there is a shutdown, and as you can tell, we actually operate on a calendar year. That's why it says calendar year 2026. We operate on a calendar year budget, which ultimately means that there is funding set aside for November and December. HUD has informed housing authorities that we will receive our funds for November and December. We are also communicating this out to landlords with a disclaimer that if anything should change, we'll let landlords know. Of course, we're closely monitoring this, but I did want to raise this, especially considering the current circumstances. And with that, I am turning it over now to our Vice President of the Housing Resources Division, Lynn Hayes.
Thank you, President Andrews. Good afternoon. Again, I'm Lynn Hayes, Vice President of the Housing Resources Division, here to request authorization to approve voucher payment standards for calendar year 2026. So annually, the Department of Housing and Urban Development publishes fair market rents for use in determining the voucher payment standards for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. The fair market rents, or FMRs, represent the cost to rent a unit in the local housing market, including the cost of the utilities. The voucher payment standards represent the maximum amount of subsidy that HOC can pay a private landlord on behalf of a housing choice voucher customer. We've been implementing small area FMRs for a few years now, starting in 2018. Small area fair market rents are published by zip code. So there are 71 zip codes in Montgomery County, and they're published according to the number of bedrooms within the metropolitan areas. The housing authorities have the flexibility to establish the voucher payment standards, typically ranging from 90% to 110% of the published small area fair market rents. HUD, however, published PIH Notice 2024-34, giving housing authorities additional flexibility to increase payment standards up to 120% of the published small area fair market rents if they meet one of two criteria. The first is if families with issued vouchers have success of securing a unit to rent, if that rate is 75% or less, or if more than 40% of families with issued vouchers are rent burden or paying greater than 30% of their adjusted income for their housing. HOC meets the first criteria in that we do have a success rate of less than 75%, meaning families with issued vouchers, only 63% of them successfully lease units. So we are recommending that HOC approve voucher payment standards at 113% of the published small area fair market rents. This year, the fair market rents decreased in the majority of our zip codes. So again, there are 71 zip codes in Montgomery County, Maryland, and the fair market rents published by HUD decreased in 59 of our zip codes. Alternatively, last year, the fair market rents increased in all zip codes. So it's a vastly different change this year where the fair market rents decreased in the majority of our zip codes, whereas last year they increased in all of them. We're recommending, again, payment standards to be equal to 113% of the published small area fair market rents in all zip codes and all bedroom sizes effective January 1st, 2026. By doing so, this will allow our families with access to high opportunity areas while also increasing our program utilization size and then reducing the risk of funds for recapture from our reserve balance. HUD recommends that housing authorities maintain a reserve of 4 to 6% of our annual budget authority. Next slide. So as President Andrews mentioned, this is a real laborious process. It's a lot of data to review. We have a very talented team of analysts who are here. So thank you, team, who do this process every year. So there are 71 zip codes, as I mentioned. HUD publishes the FMRs by bedroom size, ranging from efficiency to 4 bedrooms. So overall, that means we're looking at 355 different amounts to determine how much our voucher payment standard should be set. Our team does a comparative analysis where they're looking at the data manually. So again, 355 different zip codes. We're using HUD software, which is called Tool of Tools. That software helps us determine how many of our families will be rent burdened by entering in different amounts into the system. And then lastly, we used an Excel feature called Solver. All 3 of these approaches rendered the same effect, which is the best recommendation for our agency this year is 113% of the published fair market rents. Next slide. So the majority of our families reside, there's a typo on this slide. Let me just point that out. My apologies. Reside in 39 zip codes, not 38. So though there are 71 zip codes, our families reside in these certain 39. We have large amounts of families who live in Germantown, zip code 20874, followed by Clarksburg and Gaithersburg. Next slide. This is a continuation of where our families live, and all of the zip codes on this slide represent Silver Spring, where we have various zip codes within Silver Spring, but a large amount of our families reside in Silver Spring, with a total of 2,445 of our families in Silver Spring. Next slide. So Montgomery County also has agricultural reserves, or 93,000 acres, which limit space or areas that we can rent to voucher families or any residential properties. So there are some restrictions in terms of building and rental, and so we are pointing that out here to let you know we don't have that many families in these areas because of limitations. Next slide. Okay, so again, as I mentioned earlier, we have decreases in the majority of fair market rents, 59 to be exact. This slide is illustrating where the highest decreases occur. So as you can see, across the board, there are significant decreases in Brinklow, ranging all across all bedroom sizes. The good thing is HOC, we don't have any voucher families residing in Brinklow. Additionally, no voucher families live in Highland or Beallsville. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. So though they have decreased, ranging from $10 to $400 across the board, the top decreases, we don't have that many families living there. On average, the fair market rents decreased by 2% across the board. Next slide. Okay, so this slide is showing where we have increases. So the fair market rents increase in 12 of our 71 zip codes, ranging from $10 to $670. From this slide, you can see that the significant increases are in Garrett Park. Unfortunately, we don't have any voucher families residing in Garrett Park or Mount Airy, which is kind of next in line. But we do have families in some of the other zip codes where the fair market rents increase. Specifically, we have families in Bethesda, Gaithersburg, Tacoma Park, and Damascus. Next slide. There are certain high opportunity areas in Montgomery County which are listed here. And we wanted to illustrate or show you that we do have voucher families living in some of these zip codes. Our goal ultimately is to allow families with greater access to these high opportunity zip codes where they have better opportunity for top paying jobs, there's transportation, and better schooling. And studies have shown that children who live in these kind of high opportunity zip codes have better long-term outcomes. So our goal is to expand the voucher payment standard as much as we can to allow families with access to all parts of the county. Next slide. So we have families who, as I mentioned, lived in certain parts of the county. So we are showing you here where specifically they live. So the top 15 zip codes are listed here with the corresponding submarkets. So most of our families, as you can see, live in Silver Spring, Germantown, or Gaithersburg. And this has been the same, I want to say, for at least the last 3 years. So that's where our voucher families tend to remain: Silver Spring, Germantown, and Gaithersburg. Where we don't have, on the right side of the slide, is showing you where we don't have that many families. So very few families in Ashton, Poolsville, Brookville, and a few in Chevy Chase and Damascus. Next slide. So the unit size has changed from last year to this year. We've seen growth in the number of families with one-bedroom vouchers. So 43% of our families now occupy one-bedroom vouchers, whereas last year it was 34%. So that's a pretty significant growth. And that may be attributable to the number of seniors that we're housing. That has grown as well, where 38% of the families that we serve are senior citizens. The two-bedroom has remained slightly. It's changed a little bit. It was 36% last year, so it's decreased to 34%. So we're seeing kind of a shift. Also, the 3 bedrooms last year was at 23% and now at 18%. So we're serving smaller household sizes. Next slide, and not that many efficiency families. This slide is showing you the number of families who are rent burdened. So currently 12% of our families are rent burdened. And this is showing you what parts of the county that are most impacted by rent burden are paying more than 30% of their income. So we can see that the greatest zip code is Germantown, followed by Silver Spring, then Clarksburg. Next slide. We wanted to show you here the effect of what it will look like financially and also on our families if we increase the voucher payment standards right through a range of different prices. So we could lower the payment standards to 90% of the published fair market rents. In doing so, more than half of our program would be rent burdened. We would grow our reserve balance tremendously and then be at risk of HUD recapturing those funds. If you look all the way at the last green column or row, if we establish the payment standards at 113%, only 953 of our families would be rent burdened. We would reduce our reserve balance to 6.2 million, or 4% of our annual budget authority, which is right kind of where we're targeting or aiming to be, so that HUD will not come and take those funds back from us. Yes.
Lynn,
Sure.
why you don't have an amount for the 113%? I don't see it at risk number. Or
because so if we establish or you all approve 113, no money will be at risk.
Okay.
So that's a good thing. HUD won't take anything because we would have 6.2 million in our reserve, and so which is 4%. And what HUD says is we should have between 4 and 6%. So that's a good thing. And so, yeah. We wanted to, we looked at kind of all possible approaches, and this was the best one.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. So this slide is illustrating the financial impact as well, showing utilization and then our finances also. So we have an attrition rate of about 57 families per month. So 57 families leave the voucher program every month. And based on the call-up schedule that we are in the midst of doing right now to increase our program utilization, we see growth of 67 families per month. So it's a net of 10 families per month. So at the end of calendar year 2026, we anticipate that our program would have grown to almost 98%. Financially, the financial impact, as President Andrews mentioned, we're funded on a calendar year basis. Our estimated funding is 141 million. Our projected expenses are 145 million. However, we have 10 million in our reserve balance. So overall, with our estimated funding, which is, we're estimating that right now based on HUD funding us at 100% proration. We don't know, but that's what we are basing it on. 100% proration with a proration factor. So we anticipate we'll receive 141 million plus our 10 million in reserves, which is overall 151 million. If we subtract our projected expenses of 145, that will leave the 6 million in our reserve balance, which again is 4% of our annual budget authority and no risk of recapture. Next slide. So in summary, we're requesting that the Administrative and Regulatory Committee join the staff's recommendation to establish voucher payment standards for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. There is an additional table which I want to share with you as well, so you can see a comparison of what the voucher payment standards look like from last year to this year and the difference that it will be. The budget or financial impact again is our expenditures will increase by 4.4% or 3.6 million, leaving a reserve balance of 6.2 million. And again, this is all based on projections of 100% proration. AJ, can you show the next slide, the table that was included? So this is the table that we will disseminate to the public that shows the voucher payment standards by zip code, by bedroom size, but there's another comparison table I want to go to. This one. Can you scroll? Oh, yeah, thank you. So if you look at this, starting all the way to the first column in the left, it shows the voucher payment standards for the current calendar year 2025, where we have payment standards at 110% of the published fair market rents. The green columns represent the recommendations for this year, or 113%. Can you scroll over a little bit to the right, AJ? So they can see the last column. Yep, keep going. Yep, thank you. And so I wanted to just highlight or show, so even though we're recommending an increase in the voucher payment standards from 110% to 113%, in some zip codes, the voucher payment standards will decrease. And so that's where you see the dollar amount difference in red. So anywhere where you see in red or parentheses, that's showing how much the payment standard will decrease. And even though, again, we're asking for a higher amount because the fair market rents decreased in the majority of our zip codes, that's why these values are decreasing. And so I also would like to mention, even though that the payment standards are decreasing, anytime there's a decrease in payment standard, it's effective 2 years after the approval of the payment standard. So if this is approved in January, effective January of 2026, in zip codes where the payment standards are decreasing, they are not effective immediately, right away. It's 2 years after the publication of the effective date. And oftentimes, these amounts become obsolete because next year HUD will publish new fair market rents that may increase or decrease. We don't know at this time. But I just wanted to make that clear so you commissioners had a good understanding of what it is that we're asking and what the effect will be. And at this time, we'll take any questions that you may have.
Let me go first, please.
Okay.
Lynn,
Yes.
so what you're saying is, even with the amount that you're asking for, the 113%, it won't go into effect until 2 years after?
If it's decreasing.
If it's decreasing.
If it's decreasing. If it's increasing, it will become effective January 1st. And so we process it for all new admissions. So anyone that we select from the waiting list, these new rates would automatically apply effective January 1st of 2026. If it's for an existing family already in the program, the increase would be effective at the next annual recertification or interim exam. So if you look in this last column, blue, right? So if
I can't really see it.
You can't see it?
Mm-mm.
Okay, we can make sure that he's making it bigger. Right, so if it's increasing, then it would be effective at the recertification or interim, whichever comes first. And then
that would be the $17 if it's increased, if it's not increasing.
If it's increasing,
if it's increasing. Okay, I got it. And
but if it's decreasing, like you see where it has 226, right, that's 2 years after the approval. Right.
I got it. Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, and then what I'm saying is, so next year HUD will publish new fair market rents, and we'll go through this exercise again, and it might go up. So if it increases, then the 226 could become obsolete.
Okay.
If that makes
Thank you.
sense. Sure. Certainly.
My fellow commissioners, do you have any questions? Paul?
I have several. Zola, you want to go first?
Yeah, that's okay, Paul. You can go first.
Yeah. Lynn, thank you. That was a great presentation as usual. My first question is, so I was a little bit stunned to learn that HUD's FMRs are declining by 2%, when as we all know, the persisting narrative is the rents keep going up and affordability is worsening. So do you and the analytics team have a sense of why that happened?
I do not. I think there is recourse where if we disagree with it, and so it's a pretty involved approach that HUD uses to come up with these rates or these amounts, but I don't know why they decreased. I do know if we disagree with them, we can reach out to them when they reopen.
Yeah.
To contest them.
Yeah. Which takes me to kind of the second question I had for you is the presentation refers to new advanced quantitative methods to validate HUD's data. Are we using our own data set to compare to the rents HUD used?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a data set that Matt tracks rent levels in Montgomery County, Maryland, and we run the FMR analysis against that to see how close we are to HUD.
And I'll let the analyst jump in. So we look at various attributes, right, in our data set from our system of record, but it's looking at every individual household by zip code, by bedroom size, looking at their current rent, then forecasting or projecting what the new rents will be based on the county's rent stabilization guidelines. Mm-hmm. So I think it's 5.74%. So projecting what the new rents will be, looking at the number of households who are currently rent burdened, and then also our utilization. So it's a huge data dump.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I when I was looking at it, I did have a question about how the county's rent stabilization plays in, but that at least allows some increases. And yes. HUD's saying the rents went down. Mm-hmm. So practically, where our rents are going up, our voucher payment standards are going up, what happens if the landlord doesn't think they're sufficient, since they are less than the amount they would have gotten under the county's rent stabilization rents?
Say that again. Let me make sure I understand the question.
We're setting a new payment standard. Mm-hmm. We have most of our residents are with existing landlords.
Yes.
And the payment standard is going to change what the landlord can charge for rent. What if the landlord doesn't like what we're saying they can charge? They can walk away at the end of the lease term. Am I correct?
They can only charge the 5.7%. So for an existing tenant, they can only use the 5.74%. The payment standard is really the cap or the maximum amount for rent and utilities. And so there are two things that come into play. The first thing is rent reasonableness. So a landlord may say, I want, way more than the payment standard. So we do affordability testing and rent reasonable testing before we would approve any rent increase. Mm-hmm. So there are other factors that come into play to answer that. But so the rent might not be reasonable. And so then we would negotiate. We do a lot of rent negotiations with our landlords to ask them to lower the price. So the rent reasonableness is rent comparisons of 3 similar unassisted units. So if the rents aren't reasonable and they ask for a higher amount because they want it, then it is an automatic denial. Okay. And then for the affordability, if it's going to cause the family to be rent burdened, particularly for a new admission, families are prohibited from paying greater than 40% of their adjusted income when they first come into the program. So we have 2 rental market analysts who do rent negotiations with our landlords.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess, Lynn, I'm focused on the existing tenant
Mm-hmm.
who's paying 30% of their income
Mhm.
under the current payment standards.
Mhm.
The landlord wants to increase the rent based on the county rent stabilization limits,
Okay,
and their new rent is reasonable.
okay.
The then our tenant just has to pay a higher percentage of their income towards the rent.
Only if it exceeds the voucher payment standard.
Right,
So
right.
yes, they would pay the difference. If it doesn't, then HOC would pay the difference.
And if the landlord doesn't like the new voucher payment standard, we would negotiate with them, but in the end, the landlord could walk away.
Yeah, I mean, so the key is the rent stabilization amount. If the rent increase that the landlord is requesting exceeds the voucher payment standard, the tenant has to pay that difference.
Yeah, yeah. And if it doesn't exceed the voucher payment standard, but the landlord thinks he can get a better rent on the market, he or she still has the right to end the
I mean,
lease.
a landlord can end the lease for any reason after the initial term has expired. So if it's on a month-to-month basis, but generally that we have good staying power because
Mhm.
landlords like to receive the automatic payments from
Yeah,
us.
yeah. And then I'm really just probing for context. The importance of these payment standards are how much our tenants pay and how happy the landlords are staying in the program.
That's right. It's the payment standards really represent the maximum amount of subsidy that we will pay.
Right, right, right. Zola, did you want to jump in? I've got a couple more.
Actually, thank you, Paul, but that actually covers a couple of my questions. And I just want to let folks know that I am jumping off in about 2 to 3 minutes to go to my mayor and council meeting.
Okay.
Okay, great. So Lynn, I'm going to press on just a couple other questions. Tell me about the reserves. So we have $10 million in reserves now, but based on my math, that exceeds the 6% standard that HUD might have recaptured some of those reserves.
Right. So we want to spend it down.
Spend it down. Okay,
Our goal is
that
to
kind of gets
spend it
rid of all my
down.
other questions.
Yeah, we want to spend it down so they don't take it back. And by applying this higher rate, we'll spend it down.
Yeah, terrific. And what are the reserves for? Are they for moments like this? Or do we use them for emergencies?
Both.
Yeah. Are there limits on how we can use them, or so long as we use them for the voucher program?
For housing assistance payments in the voucher program.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because then finally, my final set of questions have to do with high opportunity areas. How do we define those?
Where there's a low poverty rate, less than, I want to say 20%. So low poverty, I don't want to say concentration, but that's really what it is.
Based on poverty rates.
Mhm.
Because the chart in the documents looked like it was using the income for that zip code.
I think it put income in as well, but that just was an extra added.
Yeah. But we don't have features to defining high opportunity areas like schools or transportation or access to jobs kind of things.
What do you mean?
We're solely looking at the income or the poverty levels of the areas to say this is a high
No,
opportunity.
it's all of those things too. And I believe I said that in my speaking points, but yes, it's all of those things. It's better schools, education, transit, employment opportunity, all of those things.
Yeah, yeah. I would be interested in learning more about specifically what goes into our definitions of high poverty areas. I mean, not high opportunity areas.
Okay.
Yeah, and it'd also be helpful. I think that I know other commissioners would love to see it as maybe in the presentation for the full committee include a map of mapping where our vouchers are in the county by concentrations, and then a map that shows them by those zip codes that are considered high opportunity or not. I don't know what it looks like.
Map
like
versus the chart, isn't it? I
think a map would be really helpful.
Okay.
And easier to dip into than the chart.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm following, and maybe team, we can go back to the slide because there is a slide that outlines the zip codes.
Yes.
So you're saying to transform the
There was a map. Can we go back to the maps? We did see a map, two maps. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And those were a little confusing to me because I had to read the footnote to realize that it was only where we have vouchers.
So what is it that you would want to see, I guess?
I would like to have them with dots on this map for where our voucher holders are, and color coded for which are high opportunity areas and which are not considered high opportunity areas. So it would just where our current voucher holder, how much of our voucher holders have been able to get into these higher opportunity areas that, as we Lynn said earlier in the presentation, was her, was our, I think a lot of our desires.
I guess I just want to make sure we're not, can we go back a couple slides? Let's just make, I want to make sure I'm clear on what we actually, because let's walk back through. Lynn, if you would direct the team as to where they should be,
Sure.
So that we can walk him through what we currently produce, which I thought got to those.
Can you go to the next slide for me, AJ?
I just want to chime in that I do support this recommendation, and I do have to jump, and I am also interested in learning, but perhaps through a description, more of a narrative description of what is meant by high opportunity areas. Like when you say good schools, like what does that mean?
Okay.
But it could be more from a narrative.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So AJ, go to the next slide. So this slide is showing you, right, the 38 zip codes where our families live. So there's 71. And so you would like to see, I think I understand kind of in here where the, right, a dot or how many people are in each of these locations.
That's right.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Also, right. And so it really is, I guess you're asking us to combine the slides because I think the data is here. You just would like it presented differently. So go to the next slide. So this is the same thing. So this is showing you where our families live, and these are all Silver Spring zip codes on this slide, and they're 2,445. Go to the next slide, please. Next one. Next one. Next one. So this is showing you where our families, so you would like to see like this in 20817 on the map, right? There are 122 families in that zip code. You just want to see it differently.
And I tried to do that, Lynn. I tried to flip from this side back to the other zip code slides to try and get in my head where the concentrations were.
Yeah, so you want to see how many by zip code, and then go to the next slide. And so this is showing you really where they are. So this is, right, the majority of our you want to see this on the map. So most of our families live in zip code 20874, 939 families.
Yeah. And I might even
by 20904, Silver Spring, 810 families.
And other ways in which I've seen this kinds of data presented is you would color code the high, have a heat map where there's higher concentrations of voucher holders and lower concentrations, and then some sort of colors to say have the high opportunity and low opportunity also designated.
Okay, so I think the data is here. You just would like a different visual presentation.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, we'll see what we can do to make that shift.
Commissioner Weech, do you have any more questions?
No, Madam Chair, I think I'm good. Thank you.
You're good? Okay. Then Commissioner Shaw left, so I want, and hopefully you want, to take this to the full commission on November the 12th.
Yes.
So moved.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
No, thank you. Seeing that there's no additional questions and there is no further business to come before this committee meeting is over at 4:43 p.m. Okay? Have a nice evening. Chelsea, can you stay on the line for a minute? I just want to talk to you for a minute,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
Thank
No
you.
problem.
All right.
Thank
Goodbye,
you.
everybody. Take
Bye-bye.
care.